So thank you for visiting campus today, coming
Thank
to
you
give
for
this
having me
lecture.
over.
Of course. So first, tell us a little bit about yourself.
My name is Gabriela. I teach at NYU. I've been there since 1998. I teach Hindi and literature, ancient Indian literature and modern South Asian literature.
So why do you think it's so important to study languages like Hindi that are a little less commonly taught here in the United States?
First of all, it's very important to study another language. A language means another culture. Another culture means another way of understanding the world. And the language expands horizons in a way that no other discipline, no other type of knowledge or experience can do. Why less commonly taught languages? Because the commonly taught languages are the ones that we're anyway familiar with the cultures that they're spoken in. There's a lot of research done on these languages and these literatures and these cultures. And there is a common understanding among us here in the United States or in Europe or, for example, in Australia. But actually, our languages that are commonly taught, they have benefited, they have been in touch with, they have expanded themselves, enriched themselves by being in touch with other languages that are less commonly taught. And I think that less commonly taught languages are extremely important, especially in a global world where we need to have cultural sensitivity with the people whom we want to communicate with on a regular basis and do business with and do co-research with and find ways to be mutually beneficial.
What advice do you have for those that want to study a less commonly taught language, say at a university?
I hope that the person that wants to study a less commonly taught language realizes that it's a full-time commitment. And it's a full-time commitment because it is supposed to change that person. So a person that wants to study a less commonly taught language is a person that really is ready to change, ready to explore something very new, something very different, and at the same time understand and realize what is not new, what is the same. So the contrastive and comparative analyses that go along with the less commonly taught languages and cultures are far more intense than with the commonly taught languages and cultures. And that's why I think that it takes something special to be self-motivated to take a less commonly taught language. This is number one. And number two, this is on a personal level. And number two, on an academic level, the challenge of taking less commonly taught language is that in many cases, there aren't that many resources. There aren't that many learning materials. So the teachers themselves are figuring their way how to be more engaging and what kind of authenticity to bring in the classroom and how. And the students actually have more responsibility in their learning, and that makes them even better learners in general.
What career options are those that will choose to teach or choose to study a less commonly taught language in school?
There are several I think reports nowadays about, number one, the fact that graduate school admissions offices look at whether a student and how long a student has studied the language. Number one. Then we're going to the professional field. Walmart, we have Bank of America, we have different businesses, Yahoo. They have had cases where they were looking for employees with specific less commonly taught language skills. Not only that, in the health area where we know a lot of students are going, especially with Hindi students, a lot of students are going for medical school. The health area, both nurses and the doctors actually are considered having advantage if they know Hindi or Urdu because of the communities that they serve. Not only that, but the job of the future is interpreting and translation. And the more global the world becomes, the more this skill and the need for this kind of jobs will increase.
What do you see as the biggest factor that has caused the recent Hindi boom? I know that's something you're going to be talking about in your lecture. And then also, what sector do you see as being most greatly affected by the Hindi boom?
The Hindi boom is a phenomenon, definitely. It is related to several factors, one of which is the economic status of the speakers of South Asian languages and their own interest in preserving the language. It wasn't the case until maybe a decade ago. It wasn't so much the case until maybe three decades ago. But nowadays, we have a boom of engineers in the Silicon Valley who are young, entrepreneurial type of people who are coming with their families, bringing their kids, and they don't have a plan to actually stay and live here. Some of them want to go back, and they need their kids to be able to speak their own language. This is one. Number two is India is becoming a world power, both political, economic, and we need to be aware that whoever goes to India, yes, at the job place they will speak in English. But once they go out of the office, everything is done in a local language. And Hindi is not an official language, but it is the language of communication. It's the lingua franca of India. So more and more jobs are opening in India for Americans and vice versa for Indians in here, and the language becomes more visible. The community itself is becoming more visible. And also, the community itself is being perceived in the United States and internationally as an educated community. So in a way, Hindi now is developing prestige that didn't exist before.
So part of your research focuses on gender in Hindi literature. So I took an Introduction to Hinduism class last semester, and I wrote my final paper for the class on the Bhakti movement and how that kind of went against traditional social norms and gave women kind of an outlet to express themselves, and it kind of gave them some spiritual liberation. Do you have any more insight into that movement or what it did positively for women?
This is a movement that develops in the medieval time when actually there is this new need to find a way for direct communication with God, to find a way to directly express the whole feeling of devotion. And the voices that were that emerged in the Bhakti field are also female voices. And it is true that this is a way for independent, not mediated way of expressing feelings, but it's also something else. It's in my mind one of the most important parts, dimensions of the Bhakti movement for women is that women, because of the Bhakti movement, started having access to the public realm, to the public domain. So that was more important to me than the fact that they were able to express directly their devotion. So the literary aspect of what they could do allowed them social access, which is the most important one. Because when we think of, let's say, the literature before that, most probably there were voices of women, but they did not come to us. because the public discourse was engaged in topics and with speakers who were males, and the topics were related to with a social type of system that was the one that was relevant to the males. And everything that we know about women was through the eyes of the males. So what happens here with the Bhakti movement is that there is no mediator, and that they are what they say, what they think, without anyone changing or putting another layer of normativity to what they say.
Oh, that's neat. So, last question. What are your plans for the future research-wise? What are some other topics that you want to explore?
I am definitely interested. I have my research, I have a double personality disorder as it goes to my academic life. I have the heritage learners and language pedagogy on the one hand, and I have some research done there for how to be efficient and what kind of strategies are supposed to be used. And I would like to do a lot of work with native language speaking teachers and how their training needs to be different from, for example, teachers that learn the language that they teach as a foreign language. So this is on the one hand. On the other hand, of course, gender is my love, and this is my passion. Right now I'm trying to build a pipeline conceptually between, we have the Rig Veda and we have the gender encoding language aspects that I have studied. Then I'm moving on to Manusmriti. These are the laws of Manu. So we're talking, let's say, between 15th century and 9th century text. Then we're moving to 1st century text, around 1st century text, where women have explicit women's status, women's roles, prescriptions for women are explicitly stated. But then I also am looking at the Natya Shastra, which is an encyclopedia on theater, along with several works on poetics, where female and male characters are described and classified. And I'm comparing what I find in the female and the male characters in terms of their classification, how it differs, and whether I can find these differences in a dialogue with Manusmriti and in a dialogue with the Rig Veda. So it's a long-term project that I know I might have to be involved in it in maybe 1 or 2 more lives, but I hope I'll be able to.
All right, thank you so much.
Absolutely, it was a pleasure to talk to you.
Gabriela, I actually have a question for you. I was wondering if you could talk about your own language background and how you became interested in Hindi as a language and South Asian literature.
My high school was ancient languages and cultures. So we studied the 5 years of Latin, 4 years of Old Greek, 3 years of Old Church Slavonic, but we also studied Sanskrit. We were exposed to Hittite and other ancient languages. So we studied Sanskrit there, and I sort of became very interested in something that was not Eurocentric, in something that was different, although in the Indo-European family. So then I continued with my major. My master's degree is in the so-called Indology. This is the old German type of educational sort of concept that we used to have many, many years ago. And then I was interested in continuing for my PhD in I was interested to do research on historical linguistics. How does language change? How do forms change, or syntactic constructions change? But then I came to the United States and I realized I knew nothing about gender. It wasn't a field at the time when I was a student. I was very interested in how language encodes gender, and that's how I moved from historical linguistics to discourse, pragmatics on a gender basis, and how we can read texts in order to see what we can decipher in terms of the relationship between men or women, their roles, the stereotypes of the authors who compose these works, and so forth. So it's a long path, but when I was 5, my mom would say, if you don't stop doing this, you're not going to go to French tomorrow. So I was into languages all my life. I started very early with French, and then I moved on to English, and then Russian was something that we studied throughout higher education in Bulgaria. I studied a little bit of the ancient languages. We don't speak them, but they give you a rich background. So that's why I'm between linguistics and stylistics and literature. I still haven't figured out exactly what's my interest. That's why I need a few more lives.
Okay, absolutely. So what do you teach at NYU?
At NYU, I teach advanced Hindi,
Okay.
which is usually a course that offers individual projects, because the majority of the students are international students. So they come from India with the 10th to 12th grade Hindi, but their Hindi is very conversational. It was studied in India, and that's what we are working with a few programs in India to change the curricula of Hindi in India, because it is taught as a foreign language. So their language skills are almost as if they're not native. They are native.
Right.
They are native, but they don't exist at the advanced level, because all the disciplinary, subject-specific talk and readings are done in English. But they come back and for example, I had a student whose father had a business in Rajasthan. The Hindi skills were not good, but that student knew that a lot of the work is done in the villages. So he needed to improve his Hindi skills, his understanding of village life in Hindi, so that he can do his father's business. Another example is, right now I have a student who is studying economy. She wants to go back in India and work for the government, but without Hindi she cannot work for the government. In order for her to sit for the government exams to become a government officer, she needs Hindi. Another student right now she wants to, and I think she already landed an internship in the office of Modi in Delhi.
Yeah.
But Hindi is a requirement, and political Hindi is very different from conversational Hindi that you speak in the marketplace. So we have all kinds of students that work on different projects, because they have very specific needs, they have very specific interests, and advanced Hindi is giving them exactly that. So this is advanced Hindi, and then I teach ancient Indian literature in translation, and I teach modern South Asian literature in translation. We sort of jump over the medieval part, but there is a lot of continuation from the ancient, and then continuation into the contemporary. So we sort of marginally cover the medieval in both courses.
I see. Now, these students that come in, the international students, are they literate?
Yes.
They are literate in the Hindi script?
Yes.
Okay.
They studied it up to 10th or 12th grade, but the way you would study a foreign language, so they don't speak it. They just have the drills in their textbooks. They read some stories that they don't relate to because of the way these stories are approached. They don't identify with them. So their advanced skills are actually not there yet.
So it's giving them context for the language.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right.
Context and content.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you.